and welcome to my graveyard. I am your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man, from Salem, Mass, ready to take some names and kick some ass, punk rock zombie style. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am back from the dead, and I am ready to party. I don't know about y'all, but today on the show, on the graveyard, we are talking about probably one of my all-time favorite zombie movies. I would say it's definitely in the top 3. It would probably be the only movie I'd put right up there with Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. And of course, that is Dan O'Bannon's Return of the Living Dead from 1985. Going to be a really fun time talking about this one. And I'm going to review the rest of the series as well. So part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yes, regrettably have to review the last 2 as well. But I'm going to do the best I can. But how are we on this lovely Valentine's Day? Are we peachy? Are we Gucci? Are we taking our fine significant other on dates and whatnot? And I know I actually was driving here today and I saw that White Castle is actually doing reservations now, and they actually have like a nice sit down and they serve you like cherry Coke and a wine glass, and they have all sorts of just like cool promotions and stuff like that for Valentine's Day. So if you can't find a nice restaurant, you can't find the 5-star, White Castle is always going to treat you like royalty. So I recommend you go there if you don't have anywhere to go. I'm rocking it solo today. I'll probably end up watching one of these Return of the Living Dead movies after this, getting a big slice of pizza, you know. I have to go to work, unfortunately, but I can watch movies on the laptop. They don't know that, but I do it. You know, I'm mystic like that. I'm crazy like that. But Here we are today, and we're talking Return of the Living Dead. So without further ado, I'm going to take you through the history, how this franchise came to be, why I love it, why I think it has stood the test of time, and why I think it's actually a revolutionary horror movie. So I'm going to get into it right off the bat. So basically, how this movie came to be. Dawn of the Dead came out in 1978, and it set the world on fire. I mean, people were so stoked about Dawn of the Dead. They just absolutely loved the action, the gore, the humor, the crazy comedy, and everything about that movie. It was just a very grand zombie movie, and it's a movie that people just absolutely loved. And Romero asked the studio to give him a break. He said, please, I want a break from zombie movies. I want to make this movie Night Riders. I want to make this movie Creepshow. I'll give you your third zombie movie, which ultimately became Day of the Dead in 1985. That came out before this. And he said, I just need a little bit of a break. I need a little bit of a break. And they said, all right, we'll give you your little bit of a break. But what happened to dear old George is, because he took the little old break, they would not give him the $6 million budget that he asked for to make Day of the Dead. And in essence, they gave him about half. They gave him about $3.5 million to make Day of the Dead, as Matt is flirting with me through the other side of the glass. See, Matt's supposed to be at a rehearsal dinner, but he's here flirting with me. Goddamn crazy kids. But they wouldn't give Romero the full budget, and Romero decided with the third film in his franchise, he said, I'm going to make this balls to the wall serious. Like, there's going to be some crazy overacting, a lot of gore, and he really toned down the silliness that was in Dawn of the Dead. And for a lot of people, at the time of its release, they felt Day of the Dead was not a great zombie movie. It has since garnered a huge cult reputation and is regarded as one of the great zombie movies of all time, as it is. I think it is one of the great zombie movies of all time. But at the time of its release, it just was flat. Nobody liked it. It literally died at the box office. The movie did not make much money at all. And what the zombie genre needed was a movie to amp up the volume and to kind of take things in a new direction that nobody had gone in before. Because if you look at zombie movies after Dawn of the Dead, it's basically all these Italian directors ripping off that same movie. Zombie Flesh Eaters, also known as Zombie 2. Of course, Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, a.k.a. Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, which is a great movie. It actually came out a year before Dawn of the Dead. City of the Living Dead and The Beyond, and all these movies that Lucio Fulci did, all these movies that these Italian directors did, just basically banking off the title. Bruno Mattei, Night of Living Rats, movies like that kind of just took Romero's concept. Sometimes they even took some of the Romero music. Like, they actually took some music from Goblin that was used in Dawn of the Dead and put them in their own movies, because Goblin was an Italian band. So they said, screw it, we're gonna put this music in our film. And that's what they did. And I thought that was just super like, wow, like you're not even hiding the plagiarism here. You're just absolutely plagiarizing. But what happened over time is it became kind of stale to the people that were currently watching it. They were like, well, you're basically just ripping off the Romero films. Like that's all you're doing. And we're waiting for this new Romero film. And what Romero did was he took it in a new serious direction, and people did not like that direction. So along comes Mr. Dan O'Bannon, and he reinvented the zombie. He takes the title of a John A. Russo book called Return of the Living Dead. Let me preface this by saying John A. Russo is absolute worthless writer, filmmaker, everything. He seems like a nice guy, but when it comes to filmmaking and writing, John A. Russo is terrible. Of course, John A. Russo got the rights to Living Dead, of the Living Dead, and Romero got the rights to Of the Dead. Of course, they worked on the original Night of Living Dead together. So a lot of people, when this movie came out, were thinking, is this a Romero film? Is this a direct sequel to the 68 Romero film? And it's funny because it has nothing to do with either one of those movies. It's really completely its own thing. It really doesn't even have to be called The Return of Living Dead because it really is just a title at the end of the day. I think Punk Rock Zombies could be a title for this movie because it's basically what it is. But basically, Dan O'Bannon came along to MGM and he offered the script. He said, listen, I appreciate what Romero has done in the past. I think he's done some good stuff, but I really want to amp up the volume. I want to amp up everything. I want to amp up the cheese. I want to amp up the comedy. I want to amp up some of the gore. And I want to make this my own. I want to make this my baby, my project, my everything. And I just think Dan O'Bannon is one of the most creative horror film writers of all time. Of course, he worked on movies such as Dark Star with John Carpenter. John Carpenter's first film was written by Dan O'Bannon. Of course, the classic legendary Alien, directed by Ridley Scott. He wrote the screenplay for the original Alien. And he's just one of those guys that does not seem to get much credit. He wrote Life Force. So he's written a lot of really good horror movies, but I think this is his best because it is one of two that he directed. He went on to direct another one in the early 90s, I believe, called Shatterbrain with Chris Sarandon. I've never seen it. I've heard nothing but mixed things. It seems to be one of those movies that not many people feel one way or the other on. It's kind of just one of those movies that kind of gets forgotten about, unfortunately. But he was able to make one of the most memorable zombie movies of all time with this. And basically the plot is you've got James Karen and Tom Matthews, and of course Clu Gulager, who's in this. And James Karen and Tom Matthews work at this kind of morgue. And it's Tom Matthews' first day on the job. They're teasing each other back and forth, and he says, have you ever seen the movie Night of the Living Dead? And Tom Matthews goes, yeah, that's the one where they come back to life, start eating the corpses and whatnot. And he says that movie was all fabricated, and that's not really what happened, and somehow the army screwed up, and the barrels to these real zombies, these real zombie flesh eaters, are in the basement. Do you want to see them? And he says, sure. So they go down there, and of course they're joking about what the looks of it. And he says, are these things, fragile? And he says, no, it's completely 100%, bulletproof. Smacks it, bang, this whole big kind of toxic dust kind of just comes out, the smoke, and it kind of infects them, and it starts spreading throughout the entire morgue. And this is where you're given the plot to the film, because all the stuff in the morgue starts coming back to life and attacking the living. And of course, they call their boss Clu Gulager back, and he comes in, and he doesn't know what to do. He's running around the entire movie like a chicken with his head cut off. And I just love that they go to across the street to the guy who has the cremate system, the cremator, and it's played by Don Calfa in the film. He does a great job. I think, first of all, I got to say this. What a great cast you have. I mean, I could just read these. I actually have the cast written down because it is one of those casts that I just love everybody. I don't think anybody did a bad job. Of course, I mentioned James Karen, Clu Gulager, Tom Matthews. You have Beverly Randolph as one of the punk rock kids that you were later introduced to. Of course, John Philbin as Chuck, Jewel Shepard as Casey, Miguel A. Nunez Jr. as Spider, of course, from Friday the 13th Part 5. Brian Peck, who went on to be in the following two Return of the Living Dead movies, who really, I think, of all these actors, took a big passion to these projects and really had his fingers in almost everything, and to the point where he actually would offer scripts for some of the sequels. I just love Brian Peck. Seems like the chillest guy. Linnea Quigley is Trash, of course, one of everybody's favorite scream queens from the 80s, of course, from Silent Night, Deadly Night, the original, and then, of course, this movie as Trash, and Mark Venturini as Suicide, who also is in Friday the 13th Part 5 as well. So you got 2 Part 5 alumni. I'm signed up already because I love that movie. And in the same year, these movies came out in the same year. Mark Venturini has actually since passed away, so may he rest in peace. We really love Mark Venturini. And also, a lot of people have passed. James Cameron, Don Calfa, they're sadly no longer with us, unfortunately. Clu Gulager still is, though. But man, yeah, you got an A-level cast, just a great cast. You have these punk rock kids, and then these people that work at the mortuary, and they bring this body to Don Calfa, and they're like lying to him, saying it's rabid weasels, and we got to cremate it. We just have to cremate it. And that's the thing with this movie. It has a great sense of humor. It's one of those movies that perfectly balances the humor and the horror, and they mix in these perfect crescendo to make one great kick-ass fun film. And there's so many themes, like to have these punk rock kids play it not serious, to have these people in the mortuary kind of be joking around and stuff. And there's a point where Tom Matthew goes, "Oh man, this sucks," and then James Cameron goes, "You better watch your tongue, boy, if you like this job." And then without missing a beat, Tom Matthew goes, "Like this job? I don't like this job. The first day on the job, we had a zombie released in here, and James Cameron and Tom Matthews' chemistry is just some of the best stuff. They are so damn funny together. And it's funny, they become like pop culture icons in Japan, of all places. Japan loved James Cameron and Tom Matthews like to death. Like they had posters of those two. To Japan, those two were really the movie, and they are great together. I thought it was really nice to see a younger actor and an actor like of the stature and kind of veteran nature of a James Cameron have such good chemistry. I mean, they just don't miss a beat with each other. They were fantastic working together. And of course, they get Don Calfa for one big favor, to cremate the body, and to the point where there's no heart, no ashes, no nothing. And it, of course, cremates up into the sky. And meanwhile, these punk rock kids waiting for Tom Matthews' character, Freddy, to get out of work are partying in the cemetery. They're listening to crazy music, the classic song, "Tonight we make love till we die." And Linnea Quigley stripping and giving a whole strip show and dance on this tombstone, like this giant like tomb. I mean, this is classic 80s cheese, man. Like some of the dialogue, like I love Mark Venturini as Suicide. He says he's dressed like with a mohawk and this leather jacket and piercings all over him. And he said at one point, he goes, you think I just dress like this to get attention? He goes, "That's not what it is. This is a way of life." It's just the way he delivers the line. And Trash, of course, is trying to hit on him. And, you look super sexy tonight. And he goes, "Yeah, have some respect for the dead." And I just really, really love the cast and these punk rock kids. And as soon as this kind of smoke goes up into the sky, it begins to rain. And when it begins to rain from this kind of dead smoke, this zombie smoke that hits the sky, it becomes acid rain and brings all of the living dead in Resurrection Cemetery back to life and hungry for the living dead, the living. And I just think that's such a creative direction to take a movie, don't you? I mean, it's just one of those movies that it's just so creative to okay, we're going to have this happen, and then because of cremating the body, we're going to have the smoke go up into the sky, cause acid rain, and bring this whole cemetery of people back to life and hungry for brains. Of course, you're introduced to the whole concept that zombies are interested in brains. That was not a Romero trick. And I always thought that was another really revolutionary thing. Of course, Beverly Randolph, there's a scene where she's looking for Tom Matthews' character, and she goes into the mortuary, and she encounters the Tar Man, played by Alan Troutman, who is a legendary kind of stunt figure and who just kind of moves his body in a kind of weird limber way. And of course, he has the famous line "brains" as he kind of attacks Mark Venturini later on and eats the brains. I just love that concept, that he threw that concept in here. See, I think that's a thing where zombie movies have to sort of deliver today. I think zombie movies today, the way to move and kind of revolutionize the zombie film, the best way to do that is to make up your own rules. Like, there's no problem with taking some of the established rules, like, yeah, they're living dead, they want to eat you, but to make it something like they want to eat the brains specifically kind of changes the game. And of course, you get explanations in pretty much all of these movies as to why they want to eat the brains, although I think it's just explained the best in here. They just say eating brains makes the pain go away, which totally makes sense. I think that was the perfect explanation. You really didn't need that much more. But just so much fun characters, moments, and gore. I just love everybody in this movie. I think Clu Gulager is really, really funny as Bert, and of course, like I was saying before, the rabid weasel scene, and he's just freaking out over the whole thing, and the army's gonna come in here and they're gonna fire me, Frank. This is all gonna fall on you. As Frank and Freddy start slowly but surely kind of becoming dead. Like, and the makeup they use is so well done, man. They're all cold and turning blue in the face, and they have these paramedics come in and, what's your temperature? And the guy goes, room temperature, because they don't have any pulse. They don't have any reflexes. They're experiencing rigor mortis. They're in pain and they're dying slowly, but they're still alive. And like, I always thought that's another really great concept that Dan O'Bannon was able to come up with. And I thought, man, that is something that's brutal, because you just see the agony on their faces, and they're just like, oof, man, you kind of feel so bad for these characters that are going through this, all because of hitting a barrel. You know what I mean? And I just think that's just really, again, another really smart concept to do with a zombie movie. And that's the thing. Like, I feel like Dan O'Bannon today gets the respect that he deserves. And this movie, when it came out, was a pretty big hit. I think it made like $15 million or was close to that at the box office. I think this was a movie that horror needed at the time. I really do. Like, I think there's just so much fun nature in this. I think the gore in it, when there is gore, granted, it's not one of those movies that is a full-out gore fest, but when there is gore, I think it's so well done, man. So well done. There's a scene, of course, where Brian Peck gets killed, and that zombie's like eating his brain, and just this amazing blood spatter everywhere. I just think that's so good. I also really like the design of the zombies in this. A lot of the zombies kind of look different from one another. There are midget zombies. There are zombies that are ripped in half. There are just anything under the sun kind of zombies. They were very creative with the extras that they used. And again, Dan O'Bannon just broke the rules with this movie. These zombies talk, unlike Romero zombies. These zombies run, unlike the Romero zombie movies. And to take that concept and kind of make it his own this wasn't an infected people's movie. This wasn't a movie that, like 28 Days Later, or in the vein of those movies. This was a zombie movie, and he just said, screw this. I am going to reinvent the zombie movie. And he was able to do that. And like, I think there's no other 80s zombie movie or even 80s horror movie that feels as much as the era as this does. This is so goddamn 80s. And it's one of those movies that it's timeless. I think Return of the Living Dead is timeless. I actually had the privilege to see this last week in a double feature format over in Huntington. They do these retro picture shows with back-to-back 35mm double features. Of course, this followed by part 2. And the crowd reaction to this movie is just legendary. Like, everybody was just laughing, having fun, popcorn in the air, having a good time at the movies. And like, that's what I think the problem with Day of the Dead was for a lot of people. Day of the Dead is kind of a dreary movie. Like, it's not a movie that I actually would want to see in the theater, I don't think. because, to be honest, it's exception of the final act, it's very dialogue-ish. It's very kind of wordy, and it's not really a fun time. It's actually kind of a tragic movie when you look at Day of the Dead, but this was the exact opposite. This was bring your date, bring your buddies, get everybody together, get some popcorn, get some pop, and enjoy the ride. And like, that's what kind of a movie this was. And I think that's a reason why it's become so popular in pop culture over time. The ways it was able to reinvent the zombie genre, a genre that had already been established by a master, a genre that nobody thought anybody could do anything new with. And he came along and said, nope, this is what I'm going to do. And there's a great documentary on Return of the Living Dead called More Brains. It's about 2 hours long. You can look it up. It's on YouTube for free. It's a really good watch to hear what all the cast and crew went through. There were a lot of disputes with the director over his kind of attitude at times. He was very passionate about the project. However, he wasn't the greatest treating the actors. Like Clu Gulager, for one, did not get along with him. And there were stories that Clu Gulager actually on the set one day threw like a shoe at him. Like, he left the room and Clu Gulager threw a shoe at him and just made the loudest sound against the wall, and like everybody was dead silent. The character that Casey, played by Jewel Shepard, nobody apparently liked Jewel Shepard on the cast, and she was actually, I believe, a stripper at a strip club that Dan O'Bannon would go to from time to time, and that's how she got cast in the film. He was like, "You're gorgeous, I want you in my movie," and she said, "One exception, I don't want to be naked." So actually, she was the original one supposed to play Trash. She was the original one going to play the Linnea Quigley role, and then of course they went with Linnea Quigley, who, why the hell wouldn't you? Because Linnea Quigley is the scream queen of that time when it comes to nudity in horror movies. I mean, she was naked in every movie you can imagine. Nightmare on Elm Street 4 came after this. You know, she's notorious for being naked in horror movies. She had no problem with it, which, for my opinion, makes all the sense in the world. And of course, movies like Night of the Demons and like, I just think I have grown a really big respect for females that are not afraid to get naked in horror films, because like, it kind of really bothers me that there are so many problems with nudity nowadays. Like, I was watching a movie, The Neon Demon, and the lead star is Ellie Fanning, who's a really good looking woman, and Jenna Malone is also in it. And like, the whole movie, they're kind of insinuating that these are lesbian characters and you're about to get a lesbian love scene, and like, you never get any nudity. It's the most tame. I was just like, man, had you thrown that in there, man, I would have gave this movie like rave reviews. I mean, it still was a good movie, but I just have kind of a problem with laying back on the nudity. And I think that Dan O'Bannon was not afraid. He was like, listen, I want Linnea naked. I want her on Tombstone. I want her dancing to this crazy punk rock song from the 80s. And that's what you got with that movie. And that's why I think it ultimately worked, and it's so memorable in your mind. It's one of those movies. It's hard to review. It really is, because there's just so much I like about it. It's so hard to kind of sum up in a nutshell why I love this movie so much. But I think honestly, the humor, the like I said, revolutionizing the genre. I mean, there's just so much that this movie brings to the table, and I think it's a movie that to this day nobody has been able to rip off. Nobody has been able to rip this movie off and kind of make spawnings of this movie. You know what I mean? Like how Romero's Dawn of the Dead was so easy to rip off because it was such an easy formula. This movie, on the contrary, I think has such a complex formula because it's all so innovative. There's such a kind of hurdle you have to leap as a filmmaker if you want to make another movie like this, because this movie is so goddamn original. And I just love it for that reason. Of course, you have crazy finale with Miguel Nunez and Clu Gulager running out of the mortuary to try to get to the car with baseball bats, and they're beating up the living dead as that classic Return of the Living Dead score is playing. You know, dun, 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 dun. I love that score, man. That is just one of the most iconic 80s horror scores of all time. And I love they get in the car and, you ain't just gonna leave them, are you? He goes, I'm gonna have to leave them for now, man. I can't get back in the building. And they're cursing, F you, man. I just love some of the dialogue. There's a lot of cursing in this movie, which I unfortunately can't quote all of the lines for obvious reasons. But man, there's just some great dialogue and a really, really wacky ending. Of course, you have the zombies that talk and that send more paramedics. And they keep having cops come. They keep having paramedics come. And the zombie hordes attack and eat them. See, these were zombies that thought. These were zombies that used their heads and actually thought about stuff. Again, had not been tackled until this time. It was hinted at in a movie like Day of the Dead, but this movie goes full throttle with it. We're going to have these zombies think. We're going to have them be smart. We're going to have them be fast, not as stupid. We're going to have them be more violent and gory. And I just think they are. Of course, the violent scene that I really like is when Linnea Quigley is at one point talking about, you know, it'd be she delivers her line so stagnantly. I love it. She says it like so perfect to her character. She says, "It's just my terror fantasy to be eaten alive while they take off my clothes," and that's exactly what ends up happening to her about 20 minutes later in the movie. She's eaten alive in this puddle of mud, and all these zombies are just gnawing at her, and that honestly, and when it comes to the horror of the movie, that creeped me out. Like when I first saw it, I was like, oh my god, like that's a brutal way for somebody to go. Exactly how she kind of asked to go, and how scary that must have been for these zombies just swarming her in this muddy puddle and eating her alive. I mean, that's just some really, really good horror. And I love there's some slow shots through the cemetery in the beginning and towards the end of this cemetery, and how all these dead start returning to life. And of course the song, "Do You Want a Party?" which I'll have at the end here. Just iconic, man. I think that really it's so hard to summarize why I love this movie as much as I do, but I think it is a perfect zombie horror movie. I think it is one of the best zombie movies of all time. Probably number 3 on my list. It's definitely the best zombie movie that was not with any involvement of George Romero. I just love this movie. I think it's perfect. I love the cast. I love the crew. I think the director and writer, Dan O'Bannon, just does a fantastic job in this movie with creativity. And I think it's a horror movie that I think a lot of people that love this genre should watch. I think this is one of those movies that I think should be thrown up there with classics as Halloween, should be thrown up there with classics as Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. This is one of the classics. I think this is a really classic horror movie, and I dare to say that it's one of the best horror movies of the 80s. I really love Dan O'Bannon's Return of the Living Dead, one of my all-time favorites. I give this a 10 out of 10. I think it's a perfect movie. There's no problems, nothing I would change. I think it's just perfect. Perfect cast, perfect humor, horror balance, and just a great time to watch with friends. I totally recommend Return of the Living Dead from 1985. And you might be wondering, what if after all of this, what does John Grande think of the sequel, Return of the Living Dead Part 2? Oh boy. I'm going to be right, and I'm going to be honest. I really don't like Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I kind of hate it. And I went back and watched this movie last night. I also watched it at the double feature. It's one of those movies that just does not stick with me at all. Whereas the original movie has so much memorable dialogue, so many memorable characters, so many, like, I mean, you have an iconic zombie in that movie, iconic punk rock characters in that movie, funny dialogue, Clu Gulager, all this stuff. This movie is just completely forgettable. It's such a poor Part 2. Basically, the story as to how Part 2 came, it was about 3 years removed from the original. 1988 is when this movie came out. And a director by the name of Jim Wiederhorn came in, and Jim Wiederhorn also directed movies like Shockwaves and I believe Eyes of a Stranger from 1981 with Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Meatballs 2. So he didn't have the greatest. I mean, Eyes of a Stranger is an okay movie, and Shockwaves is an okay movie, but he self-admittedly was not a big horror fan. So he went to the studio kind of advertising his script, and they were like, "We love it." And I watched the documentary on this movie too, and to say that the cast did not like this guy would be an understatement. They hated this director because this movie, I think the number one thing this movie suffers from, and I kind of decided this last night when I was watching it, the problem with Return of the Living Dead Part 2, and I don't have anything to hold up here, I don't like the movie, I don't even own it. The problem with it is there's no passion in it. Like the first movie, you could see there's such a passion to create. There's such a passion to kind of promote the great stuff about the zombie genre and what you can do with it, and how you can take it to different levels that we've never seen before. Where this movie is just a rehash, and it's almost like a comedy. Like there's nothing really horrific in this movie. It's basically this kid, and this is the plot of the movie. This kid comes along and he finds a barrel. Same thing happens. He kind of hits the barrel, the smoke gets out, and the whole cemetery comes back to life again. And There's no gore in this movie. There's no real good characters in this movie. They somehow got Tom Matthews and James Karen to come back, and they're playing different roles. I won't ruin what happened. Well, they kind of die in the first movie, and just to bring them back for just the sake of it, playing two different characters, they're like grave robbers. And it's here's the difference with this movie too. It's so inorganic, whereas the first movie, the comedy was so organic and it flowed so naturally. This movie, it's so forced. It's so, are you laughing? And they're quoting stuff from the first movie, like James Karen says, if I was to die, I would like to be cremated, which happens in the original movie. Like, I'm just like, that's not funny, man. It's just such forced, horrible humor, and I don't like it at all. I don't think it's funny at all. There's a Michael Jackson zombie in this. There is a kind of a brother-sister triangle, and this TV repairman that shows up to fix their television and ends up just spending the rest of the movie with them. Like, his character has no reason to stay with them, but he does for some odd reason. You have Tom Matthews and James Karen just bumbling around this entire movie, trying to rehash the gold that they had in the original movie. I will say that their chemistry is still off the charts, but the dialogue, what they have them doing, is just so unmemorable. They have another girl with them, like Tom Matthews' girlfriend, who she was one of the few actresses on the documentary that kind of defended the movie. Everybody else kind of hates this movie that was involved. Tom Matthews said, and I quote, "I hate this movie so much that the best part of it was the crafts and services tables and what we ate for lunch." That's how bad Tom Matthews hates this movie. He literally has nothing nice to say about this movie other than the goddamn craft service station. James Karen had to go in, veteran actor, to come back to reprise a role that he played in the previous movie, had to come in and read for Jim Wiederhorn. I don't understand why he had to go in and read. Like, it makes literally little to no sense to me why a veteran like James Karen would have to go in and reread these lines. Like, what are you doing? Really? You're going to make him do it? They also wanted to bring Don Calfa back, who played the mortician in the original movie, and they made him read, and they gave it to somebody else. So, like, Jim Wiederhorn's casting, productions, his crew, I just don't understand their motivations, to be honest. Like, I don't understand. For one thing, you had no passion on the project. You had no like or love for the horror genre. He's been quoted to saying, "I'm not a fan of the horror genre." You humiliated Don Calfa. You bring James Karen and Tom Matthews back and have them bumbling around this entire movie doing nothing but screaming and complaining, and it's just not enjoyable. You have really bad zombies that talk and crack jokes. I just don't really like this movie. I will give it merits. If I had to give positives, I will say the positives of this movie. There is a pretty decent enough soundtrack. I think the soundtrack is pretty good, which I know this movie actually had tremendous problems getting the copyright to the music used in the movie. For example, on the DVD, for years, there was not the right music or score that was used in the original cut of the film. There were some copyright licensing issues. But if you look at the Scream Factory Blu-ray they released of this, they actually got the regular music off the VHS transfer, and seeing it on 35mm was cool because that was the original music, not like kind of taken from a VHS, which Scream Factory did do a good job with that release. I've seen that release. I don't own it, but I've seen the release, and I think they seem to do a really good job with that movie. For whatever reason, there is a cult following for Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I never really understood quite why. Like, I think it's one of those movies. This is the reason the people like it, and this is just a theory. I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong here. It's almost like a zombie movie for kids because there's really no gore. A kid is one of the lead stars of this movie. He's running around fighting zombies, cracking one-liners that I don't find memorable. I literally, if you ask me, Grande, quote a line the kid said, I couldn't. I watched the movie last night. I could not quote anything this kid says. It's just not memorable at all. And I just think it's a project that you can see there was no passion behind. And when your heart's not in it, your cast's hearts aren't going to be in it, your crew's heart's not going to be in it. And I think the biggest problem of the movie is Jim Wiederhorn, the director and writer. I don't think there was any passion. And Brian Peck even says on set, he was just nasty and he acted like he didn't want to be there and he didn't want to be doing that stuff. And if you do that in front of your cast and crew, odds are they're not going to want to be there either. They're not going to want to put up with your crap either. And I can't really blame them because all you really did was complain yourself. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's a mess of a movie. Pretty much everybody involved do not like the movie. Brian Peck doesn't like it. Tom Matthews doesn't like it. James Cameron said, I have no fond recollections of being on the set of that movie. It's Tom Matthews hates this movie so much he never did another horror movie. Like, he got out of horror movie acting completely. He was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore because it's just a poor film. I don't know. I think it's poorly directed too. There are scenes where you can clearly see that it was voiceover, was kind of added back into the final cut where these characters are talking and what they're saying does not match their lips like at all. I just think like that's really poor filmmaking, and this is not a movie that did not have a budget. This movie did have a $6 million budget, which is more than even George Romero had with Day of the Dead. You had twice the money Romero had and made a movie just twice as forgettable. I listen, if you like the film, that is cool. I really I was talking to my buddy Ryan last night, and he was saying try not to spoil Return of the Living Dead 2 and 3, and I started laughing. I was like, there's nothing to spoil in Return of the Living Dead 2. There's really nothing to spoil. I don't get any enjoyment out of this goddamn movie. I just don't. I know there's a cult following for it. Of all the movies to have a cult following for, why would you pick this one? Just my kind of question out to horror society. This is what it is. It's a G-rated zombie movie with not memorable characters, not memorable dialogue. It's a horribly directed film. It's a movie that had problems with the music for over the years, although I've only seen the version with the old music in it. I've never seen the DVD version where they changed all the music and stuff like that. But I mean, at the same time, it's just a movie that had tremendous production problems. It had tremendous set problems. And it's a movie, I think it really shows. I think it shows that there was no passion in it. I know this movie has garnered that cult success, as I said, but I don't know, just not my cup of tea. I'm not a fan of Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I would say this is a big step down movie. I would probably give this a 4 out of 10. And that's actually, I think, being generous. I know the movie gets like a 5.8 on IMDb. I think that's way too high. I think anything higher than a 5 for this movie would be too high. I know there is a scene I like with Mitch Pileggi from, of course, Shocker and the X-Files. He's kind of this badass army guy that says, let's shoot these zombies, buddy. And they start shooting the zombies, and then you think it's going to be awesome, but of course there's no gore in it or anything. It's just, you know what it is? It's a silly movie. It's just a silly cash-in sequel that Tom Fox, the producer of the first two movies, said, we're going to slap the name on, we're going to pretty much plagiarize 2/3 of the script of the original, and we're going to make this movie, and we're going to make a lot of money. And to my happiness, it did kind of flop. I think it had a $6.2 million budget, maybe like $9 million, so it did not make too much of a profit. And I'm kind of happy to hear that, but unfortunately, the movie bombing is the reason that the rest of the series went straight to DVD or even straight to television in regards to the last two films we'll get to. But that brings me to my second favorite of the series, Return of the Living Dead Part 3. Yes, she's to die for. Directed by Brian Nuzza, written by a guy by the name of John Penny. I love this movie. I think this is the one that should have the cult following, and to a degree, I believe it does. I know Criterion just released a Blu-ray of this a couple years back, and with a bunch of features featuring Melinda Clarke, who's also in this movie, and the lead actor. Let me get his name here, J. Trevor Edmond. Yeah, he's the lead. He plays the character of Kurt. I just think this is a great movie, and you know, on a side note, this is a great movie to watch on Valentine's Day because there's a lot of drama and kind of a love story to this movie, which is really weird. But basically, they brought in Brian Nuzza to be a director for hire. He wrote a script that they rejected. I'm glad they did because I'm not a fan of Brian Nuzza as a writer. Never been a fan of Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, which he also wrote and directed, which I think is a piece of crap, if you ask me. And this movie, I'm glad that he just directed it, and John Penny wrote the script, because I think it's a really, really good story. It's one of those movies, it's almost carried by its story, acting, and effects. And in a zombie movie, that's really all you need when it comes down to it. And it's a movie that I think, coming off Return of the Living Dead Part 2, takes a far more serious approach to the entire franchise. It's a movie that's plays itself 100% seriously. There's like no comedy in this movie at all. And I think that was a really good direction to go in because of how silly Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is. I think Return of the Living Dead was so silly and stupid that they were like, listen, let's take this concept, and the only way we're going to change it, the only way we're going to reinvent it is if we go full out serious with it. And it basically tells the story of this boyfriend and girlfriend, Kurt, played by J. Trevor Edmond, and Julie, played by Melinda Clarke, who actually does an interview on that new Criterion Blu-ray, which I watched, and it was awesome. They're boyfriend and girlfriend, and one night they sneak into this kind of military base that Kurt's father works at. And they see that they're dealing with the 2,4,5 trioxin case that is in the first two movies, and they're kind of trying to experiment on how they could kind of neutralize these zombies in the future if those outbreaks ever happened again. And they see that they bring this corpse back to life using the trioxin, and they kind of run out of there. And he says to her, he says, listen, I love you, man. I want to go away with you. I just want to be with you forever. I hate my father. We keep having to move and relocate, and I'm just sick of life. And she says, I love you too. Let's do it. Let's move. And basically, they hop on his motorcycle and they wipe out. And he's okay. He has a few scratches and cuts and bruises on him, but she crashes and burns and ends up dying. She breaks her neck and ends up dying. And Kurt's just beside himself. He's crying over this, and he picks her up, and he had just witnessed a corpse being brought back to life from the 2,4,5 trioxin. So he drives her back to the base and gives her the trioxin, and basically she comes back and she's not the same. She now has the luster for brains. She wants to eat brains, and the entire movie is really a commentary on what you would do to keep the ones you love alive. Like, it has that kind of Pet Sematary theme to it, where it's, they're dead, but they don't have to be. And they may not come back the same, but they're still alive. And it's through their love and through their passion for each other that I think this movie really it stands on its own two legs, and it becomes something original and something unique as well. I think it's really, really well done. And I don't know, there's just something about the effects work in this movie. I think it's really, really well done. You have a lot of gore, really good gore effects. You have these kind of robbers that you run into at one point, where, of course, Julie bites one of them and they start bleeding all over the place. And it's just some really good effects work. And I do think Brian Yuzna does do a good job directing this movie. I would actually argue to say that this is Brian Yuzna's best film. I know I've seen Society. I like Society. I've seen The Dentist, which is watchable. It's not my favorite. It's a lot better than The Dentist 2. And of course, it's a hell of a lot better than Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, The Initiation, which I've reviewed on this show, and that is a terrible goddamn movie. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think this movie was kind of ahead of its time. And I think this is also a movie that it kind of should have been released in theaters. Like, it's kind of a shame that this went direct to DVD, because it's way better than a direct to DVD title like that. And I don't know. I just think Melinda Clarke as Julie does such a good job as this lead character, this lead zombie. She's in pain. She's in agony. You really feel for her. And I think the design of the zombie is actually really cool too. I don't know how well you all can see that, but she kind of has these shards of glasses and the kind of needle fingers and stuff, and this kind of whole punk rock early 90s grungy type of look that I thought was really, really good. This one, see, it's funny. Whereas the original movie, I think, is a staple of 1980s cinema, and why 1980s movies, the cheese factor works, and why the horror and the comedy together is so perfect, and why that decade was really so popular with horror movies. You look at this movie, and I think it's the opposite. You move on to the 90s. You move on to a movie with a more serious tone. You move on to a movie that has kind of that 90s feel. It has a very 90s decade feel to it, whereas the horror movies of the 90s were really dying at this time, and this movie came out and kind of utilized the time period. It was like, we're going to dress 90s, we're going to look 90s, play 90s music, do 90s before the CGI craze in 95. This is one of the last awesome zombie movies to use practical effects throughout the entire thing. And I wouldn't be lying if I said that the practical effects are almost the biggest star of this movie. As a matter of fact, in the end credits, the first names they show, it's not the director, it's not the actors, it's not a special thanks to, not the producer, it's the special effects guys. That's how much they knew that the special effects guy, how big of a role they played in making this movie as memorable as it was. You have this one scene where this guy kind of gets his head, he's trying to rape the Julie character, and she kind of rips his head off of his body, but it's still connected to his spine, and she rips him up and bites him, and he kind of becomes a zombie with this crazy long spine neck. And it's just such a good practical effect, man. I think it's so well done. There's something like that in Evil Dead 2 where they do a claymation kind of long neck where Ash kind of eventually cuts the neck in half. But I actually think it's done better in this movie. It's an amazing looking effect. And I think at the same time, as good as it's directed, I think it's just one of those movies that's really just well written. I think I want to keep calling him Brad Penny. I don't know why. But John Penny does such a good job writing this movie because you really feel for all the characters. There's not a character where you're like, oh, I hate him, or oh, this character, this movie's drawn out, yada, yada, yada. Like, they come across this Riverman, and he's just great in the movie. Like, at one point, Melinda Clarke's character tries to kill herself. She jumps off this bridge, and Kurt tries to find her. He's running around and stuff, and he runs into this Riverman. He's like, I saw her jump from over there. I don't think she looked like she was going to be surviving that fall. And they find her, and he's just like, holy crap. And this movie has a good heart to it. Like, there's a point where Kurt says thank you to the Riverman because he kind of hides them away, and because she's changing, and he realizes that he has to be on the run from the authorities. And he says, I don't know what I could ever do to repay you. You didn't have to do any of this for us, and I really, really appreciate it. And he says, there is something you can do for me. And he hands him this coin. And he says, I got it in New Orleans. I want you to pass this on to the next person that you do a good deed for nothing. Just for no good reason at all. Just to be a good person. And that's like not something you see in horror movies a lot, but man, is it well done here. I think that was such a nice element to throw in this movie. A side character with a heart. And I think the actor does a great job. Unfortunately, I don't have his name. I really feel terrible for not knowing his name, but the actor just does an amazing job. Maybe I'll put it up later, his name, because he just does a great job. He almost steals the movie in the final act. And, yeah, like I said, I just think this movie overall just has such a fantastic heart to it. I think it has a great heart to it. It has good acting. It has really good special effects. It has a good direction from Brian Yuzna. And I just love the whole story. I think how the world is kind of crumbling around these two. Their love together keeps them together, and it pushes the crumbling and all this stuff apart. And I just think that is fantastic filmmaking and a fantastic direction to take a series that was so silly with the previous installment, to take it and make something new. I just think it's fantastic. I really love this movie. I give this the grande stamp of approval. I would give this movie a solid 9 out of 10. I loved Return of the Living Dead Part 3. This is a cult movie that I think you should get your hands on. I really, really love it. Like I said, good story, good acting, good direction, really good special effects, and good characters. I mean, just characters that you care for. Nobody annoyed me. Nobody frustrated me to the point where I was like, oh, I want this character to die. I think everybody just does a good job, and it's one of those really well-rounded movies from the 90s that I think should have got a theatrical release, because I think this might have been a really big hit had they, even if they took the Return of the Living Dead name off it. I think as a standalone zombie movie, this would have been awesome. But unfortunately, we never got that because Return of the Living Dead 2 bombed so badly. So, I mean, it is what it is. But yes, that is Return of the Living Dead Part 3. Brian Yuzna's Return of the Living Dead Part 3. I highly recommend that movie, especially on Valentine's Day. I think it's a perfect movie to watch around Valentine's Day. But that brings us to Return of the Living Dead 4 and 5. Why am I grouping them, you're asking? Because they are directed by the same man, because they came out on the Sci-Fi Channel back-to-back. They were filmed back-to-back. and they are back-to-back horrible movies. It is Return of the Living Dead 4, Necropolis, or as I call it, Necropolis, and then Return of the Living Dead Part 5, Rave to the Grave. I'm going to give brief synopsises on these movies because I've only seen them once, and that was too many times. I do not recommend these movies at all. Here is the plot for Part 4. The scientist of a powerful and evil corporation, Hybridtech Charles, goes to Chernobyl to buy some gallons of toxic waste to perform experiments with zombies. When a teenager has an accident with his motorcycle and vanishes, his teenager's friends, led by Charles' nephew, find that he was moved to Hybridtech. They break in the facility trying to find their friend and accidentally release a group of zombies starving for brains, which is actually not true. They do not want brains in this movie, and they actually don't run in this movie. They don't talk in this movie. They're normal, like Romero zombies. You shoot them in the brain, they die. And like that's what was so important with the original movie and the other two sequels, is that you couldn't really just kill them. They weren't just a threat that you could just bang in the head and they're dead. Let's move on. That was what was so intelligent about the other movies. These are indestructible zombies. These are zombies that are smart. These are zombies that'll run at you. That was so smart. What does this movie do? They take every element that the first 3 movies did and just completely tone it down. And this was actually co-written by William Butler. And if you don't know who William Butler is, he was actually in movies like Friday the 13th Part 7, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. He did a lot of horror movies as an actor. He showed, I got you, Tyler. He showed a lot of just love for the genre, but I got to be honest, just don't think he had a knack for writing for the genre. I don't think he knew what he was doing. This movie, it has stupid characters that do stupid stuff. There's nobody to root for. It's just painfully just bad. Like there's nothing that stands out in Return of the Living Dead Necropolis. It's just a crappy movie. It's one of those zombie movies that you can't even roast it because it's just so boring too. It's not unlike Part 5, which I'll get to. There's some fun to be had in Part 5, as bad as it is. There's just nothing redeemable about Return of the Living Dead Necropolis. I don't like the movie. I honestly think it's the worst of the 5 because it is by far the most boring and is the most bland. It's exactly what you think. Like you think direct-to-TV zombie movie, no gore, destructible zombies that don't talk or have intelligence or have anything to do with the 2,4,5 trioxin zombies in the first 3 movies. It's just one of those movies. It took the name, it tried to cash in. Obviously they didn't because they pushed them straight to Sci-Fi Channel. And I remember the movie coming out in like 2005, and I remember it bombing. I really remember it bombing and like people just hating it. And it's one of those movies, I think it has a 3.2 on IMDb, a well-deserved 3.2. I hate this movie. I'd give it a 2 out of 10. It was an honorable mention on my worst horror movie sequels list. The reason it did not make my top 10 is because I have to cut slack. It was direct to Sci-Fi, direct to DVD. So, excuse me. So, I honestly couldn't be too harsh on it. If this is a movie that got a theatrical release, though, I would have been far more harsh. And for right reason. But that brings me to Part 5, Return of the Living Dead Part 5, Rave to the Grave. Yes, shoot me. This is another just a horrible movie. I'll read the plot to this one too because, again, I'm not recommending you see any of these movies. There's really nothing to, Part 4 and 5. A college student creates a drug called Z and sells it on campus, inadvertently resurrecting the living dead who wreak havoc at a Halloween rave. All right, this movie, I will say it's a step above Part 4 because I watched these two back in the day. I remember I actually rented these movies from a Hollywood Video, and I actually always really liked the Return of the Living Dead Part 5 poster. It's kind of this girl naked crawling on a pentagram. I always thought that was really cool, but the movie stinks. The movie really stinks. It's a horrible movie. I will say that they at least try to have a little bit more fun with this movie, and it's a zombie movie where it is so bad you can kind of make fun of it. Like I remember even as a kid being like, this is so bad, but man, it is kind of entertaining because these dumb kids are taking these drugs that are turning them into zombies, and they're like, well, I'm tripping, and they're really becoming zombies. It's actually a concept that sounds really good on paper, and then you see it's handed to a director with no talent. It's handed to writers with no talent, actors with no talent. And of course they recycle the cast from Part 4. It's the same cast in both movies, same crew, everything. And they're playing different characters and ignoring that the fourth movie even existed chronologically. It's just really bad. I could not recommend Return of the Living Dead Part 5, Rave to the Grave at all. It's another movie. I will say it is a step above Part 4. I'd give it a 2.5 maybe. Maybe even if I'll round up to a 3 out of 10. I always liked the poster art for whatever reason, so I will say that was a positive. But other than that, bad movie. So, of course, ranking these movies, coming to a close here, the best is the original. Second best would be Return of the Living Dead Part 3. I absolutely love this movie. I would say third would be Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I was just never a fan. I know, like I said, I know there's a cult audience, not a part of the cult audience, and I don't know. I respect people that like it, but it's not a good movie. It is miles better than Part 4 and 5, and I'd go with Part 5 in the number 4 slot, and of course Part 4 in the number 5 slot. So, yes, so that's going to be all for my show today. We got a kick-ass, rave to the grave party song to play me out from the original movie. Thank you guys so much. It was a lot of fun talking Return of the Living Dead, and I will be back next week. I'm not going to tell you the format of the show yet. It's going to be awesome, though, when it kicks, and stay tuned, guys. But that is all for now. I am the Pajama Pants Playa, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. This is John Grande signing off from the graveyard. Peace, ladies and gentlemen.